Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on behalf of the Institute. I'm Nahad Ahmed. You've probably seen me around occasionally. I usually stand in the back and give the start sign for the speaker to speak. I am the program manager here at NYUAD Institute, and I'm really pleased introducing Dr. Aisha Belkhair. Dr. Aisha Belkhair is a research advisor at the National Archives, a Fulbright postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University. She holds a bachelor degree in filmmaking from the San Francisco Art Institute, a master's degree in ethnic studies from San Francisco State University, and PhD in Arab Gulf Studies from the University of Exeter. She is a member of several international associations and committees, among them the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage Preservation Committee, the American Oral History Association, the GCC Society for History and Archaeology, and the Arab History Society. Recognized as an expert in oral history, ethnographic studies, and the African diaspora. Her chief research interests are cross-cultural studies, women, youth, and the transformation of identity. She is a bi-weekly newspaper columnist who lectures and writes extensively on these topics, with published articles ranging from cross-cultural dialogue to the evolution of women's education in the country. Dr. Belkhair is the first Arab woman to represent Asia, including the Middle East, in the International Oral History Association. She is a graduate of the Government Leadership Program, Executive Leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Aisha Belkhair.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. به نستعين في أمور الدنيا والدين. I would like to welcome you today. And before I do that, I'd like to thank my host and the Institute here for inviting me. Arranging this speech took 11 months. This lady started with a hook and ended up with the net. I was all over the place, but to make sure that she captured me, she threw a net. And I'm glad that she threw a net and not, like our friend said, a cage. So I welcome you to what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to just shed light a little bit on something that you already know, because I know I stand humble here among people like yourself. Knowledge had various ways of showing itself in different faces and different means and different memories. And we're here just to maybe poke a little bit on the doors of that. So the journey today will take us into talking about why people of my pigmentation exist in this part of the world, what happened that made them come here, what is the pulling and the pushing factor, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what people think about in terms of stereotypes that are associated with their existence here, and we'll see how they assimilated into their identity and what came out of that. First of all, let's see. The relationship between Africa and this part of the world, I mean, the Arabian Peninsula, is an old one, and it goes way, way before history. And the people came through ships, and you could see they have no shackles around their arms or their legs. And they also came by land. And many of them that we have records today in the archives and elsewhere have documented their stories through their little stories that they gave to the British when the British established themselves here from 1820 until 1971. So many of these records speak about who they are. They really identify who they are and what is the cases that made them exist in this part of the world and how did they come. So many of these stories are part of what you can see. And you can then, when you look at these stories, you can reconstruct that community and see. So the British, of course, they emancipated, or they thought they freed people of African descent that lived in their part of their protectorates or areas under their control. So many of them would reach the flag, the British flag, and once they touch it, they can then board them on board of the ship and then issue them emancipation or a certificate of freedom, emancipation certificate. But in our history, it's different than what the British tried to make this place look like. Because Islam, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was born in 610. Shortly after that, 20, 30 years later, Islam was born. And many of the Muslims went to take refuge in Habasha, which is Abyssinia, which is Ethiopia today. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, go to Ethiopia because I've heard that they have a fair king. And that was the Muslims who relocated from Mecca going to Ethiopia. They were the first, I consider them the first political refugees, because if you are oppressed because of your religion, then, and you seek refuge elsewhere, that's the definition of a political refugee. So there was a respect and an understanding that Africans are people of fair treatment, people who are just, and people who are equal to them. And to put Islam in its first days in the hands of pagans and people who are Christians at that time as well, it was something else had to be said about that. So Islam respected them regardless of what the British tried to say, that people in this region were enslaved and they're here to free them. One important thing is we must understand is that once one of the most important figures is Bilal, who was an Abyssinian slave and then freed once he converted to Islam. He was the only person who was allowed to go on top of Mecca, the holiest shrine of all to all Muslims, to call for prayers. So let alone how people treated him. One of the times he was walking in the streets of Mecca, and he met with his freer, the person who was his master before he was freed. And he said to him, oh, you, and he called him the N-word. And somebody went to the Prophet and they told him about that. And he said, we thought this is something of the old days. New Muslims, converted Muslims, don't say these things. And that was Umar ibn al-Khattab. He was the third Khalifa after the death of the Prophet. So Umar went looking for Bilal, and he said to Bilal, Bilal, please come, put your foot on my cheek and purify me with them, because I have said something very sinful and the Prophet doesn't like it. Furthermore, Islam had 7 ways to free holders. They called them holders and captives and enslaved, because their condition is temporary, not permanent. And these 7 ways, one of them is through just giving them to the face of God. A person would want to free their conscience and will free their holder. And he will say, these people are free for the face of God. This is an act that people always have done it on either their deathbed or to clear their conscience, fearing that they will be punished and they will see something horrific if they continue their holdings. The second manumission allowed in Islam is by tadbir. It's where the holders gives a promise that they're going to free them on certain conditions. And they agree, and that even goes to their will. So after their death, that will is respected. The third one is by mukataba. And mukataba is for them to write a contract. And there are conditions in the contract to say they will be freed once these conditions are met. And the fourth one is if a slave mother, if she married the master and hold a son from that master or from that holder, that child considered free, and the mother will be free as soon as the father is dead, the captive is dead. And she's treated as such because he can then acquire her that the son can vouch for her and she can be freed through her son later on. The fifth is through kafara, which is if a slave is given and if there is a reputation of daily violence, they can be freed. These are conditions. If met, you bring 2 witnesses, and that's all you have to do to be freed. And we have the 6th one here is kafalat al-dawla, which is the country will buy the slaves and free them. And then through if ill treatment, if molested, if abused, that's also a cause for them to be freed if they brought witnesses. So we see it's not a case of capturing them, but the fact that the religion itself freed them. And that's why the Arabs, when they went to Africa in the beginning, is not only to convert them to Islam, but to make them see that they will be free through their mind and through their religion if they followed that. And here we have a guy by the name of, I consider him Moses because there is no Mississippi River here to cross, but he had helped so many people. If ill-treated or face something, he helped them. And we are able to collect some stories about him. He even brought people to his own home, pretending that they are his own children, and helped their families escape ill treatment. So the population here existed because there was a mean to survive, and at that time, at the 16th century, when they first started to bring them, or they came here, some of them by their own will, is people want to survive. And Africa was no place for them to live in the conditions that they have to face. Once here, the women have been incorporated into the homes as domestics. They took care of cooking, they took care of the children, they were nannies, exactly like they did in the South. They were nannies, they were highly respected. To this day, many of them are kissed in their forehead because they are appreciated for what they have done. Many of the families kept them in a close contact with them because they not only supported the family, but they were really members of the family. And many of the times you would see in the community what they call them milk brothers and milk sisters, because wet nursing happened through these nannies. And I have, for example, 6 brothers and sisters because my mother was wet nursing other children who happened to be on my own age. And they can belong to any tribe and they could be of any color. That's how small the community was and how close they were. So when you live in close proximity to a high gear people, high level people, you incorporate with you really internalize, your identity becomes of theirs because that's all you know. That's the only life that you know. So if you live with a merchant level class family, you will live that high life. And that's why they even have a term, دياية الشيخة شيخة. Allah يعزكم كلب الشيخ شيخ, because they really believe that they are the other person. They did not, the color is something that didn't matter. And I think racism is really a thing of luxury, because when you're here to survive, you don't care about who sits next to you and who eats next to you. But if you have that luxury of demeaning other people, it's a different case. So many of these women worked in these households as cooks, as nannies, as domestics. They were also very visible at that time in the market. They used to sell fruits, vegetables, and other things. And they were not shy to smoke in public when all the tribal and other women did not smoke. They considered themselves, and they have nothing to lose. They're the untouchables, and they can do that. So after they sell the product or what the men have got, they would buy their own stuff and walk all the way home. And you could see they're barefoot. They tell us now to go and walk barefoot to get all the energy and all the iodine and all the good stuff. This was a lifestyle at that time, and that's why diseases were not as we know them today. They were all over the place. They were in schools. They went to school side by side. There's no segregation. There is no segregation in places of death, of worship, where they eat. They ate together. They were buried together. So there was no need for anything else but for them to live and exist and be members of this society. Of course, the African influence, can be seen in many different ways. One of them is the hairstyle. And I tell you, black people in hair is something else. Can't mess with them. Many of those hairdressers who came, they really brought in a hairstyle that is called shungi. And shungi, when I looked at it, it's an old kingdom in Timbuktu, somewhere there. I don't know what time and all of that, but the name just struck me. I just found out lately that there is a kingdom called Shungi. And I tried to see, is it really that tribe? Is it linked to this hairdo? And it seems like of all the cultures, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Africans are the most people who use braids with mud or with, cow dung or with anything to keep the hair in place. It's one way of hair management. And this hair management, or this hair braids or style or hairdo, is very famous in the Emirates, and it's even considered one of many of the ladies, if you can see, who are sitting here, they all the little girls have braids in the back, and all of them have braids. And the significance of braiding is ladies who used to braid have played a major role in society. Imagine this lady going from home to home and just braiding people's hair, and she, of course, have to listen and have to observe everything happening from this household to the other household. She can describe who's eligible for marriage. She can describe the inside of the house. She can describe what is the mannerism of people in the house. So in the absence of the World Wide Web, she was it. She was the social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, everything all together, because she goes from place to place, and she can really describe things with a grain of salt, or she can exaggerate to her like. So these ladies plays a major role also, not in this, but they were able to go to the ruling class families and go to the merchants and go to the poor, and they carry information from different places and add them in a different way and reorganize them in a different way. And mind you, if they are, for example, if they need something from somebody and they're braiding them, and the lady they're braiding is half asleep, they're passing her information, they controlling her mind and everything. If she said no, she would say yes. After she's been braided, she'll say, yeah, okay. So they were able to really go and feed in the African myth and African theories and we will see how that was passed. But if she, for example, had to do her mistress's hair, and then she's not allowed to be free that day, she would do something where the answer at the end of that hairdo is yes. So this is from the internet. I tried to find something similar to this hairdo, and that's the closest I could find. But nonetheless, this population came and they were incorporated. Now we saw with the women, but the men were all over in the cultivation fields. They worked with palms, growing the palms and harvesting and packing it. They worked all the way from Iraq and Basra all the way to Oman and this region. They worked in irrigation systems. This is in Basra. So even later on, when the the oil was discovered in the 30s, the concession for oil, they also were part of that. When the red oxide was harvested in Tumb and in Das and other areas, they were also part of that. So they came in different parts and different sizes, and they were also guards to the ruling family. So they were there, they carried information, they passed information, they were there, and like I said just now, the chicken of the sheikh is considered sheikha because they spoke with the authority. They were the ones who executed directives. They were the ones who carried on information. So they were really highly regarded. And our history tells us they were regents in some areas of the Emirates. Now we come to the serious part. What carries them here is that fluid liquid called water. And they came crossing the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, the open sea of the Arabian Gulf. And they were, of course, involved in the sea more than anything else. In the sea, they were fishing. This is in Jumeirah. And, of course, they were divers. Now, diving have taken a toll on the African population because many of them, young or small, they will inherit even their parents, their father's debt, and they'll carry on with the system. Many of them were in it for many years. Now, you tell me on this ship, can somebody practice racism on this ship? Everybody is engaged in doing what they do because the idea is to survive. There is no room for luxury. That's why people in this part of the world did not indulge in music or art because they considered that every day is life to survive. And even the music that they did is music to let time go by. It's music to entertain them as they do work, to ease that work that they do. It's music to motivate them to do more work. So it's always associated with aspect of their existence rather than with entertainment. Later on, of course, the doors were open and entertainment became part of that daily life. So the sea has absorbed people and took them to be part of all year long. For example, they would go in May and come back in July, and they'll go back in the winter when it's hard to see. Even in the sea, it's so murky and silty, and they will still dive. So it was really hard. And on board of a ship, of course, it's a nude colony where you sleep on what you harvest. They sleep on the shells and they get up next morning to dive. So it was really a harsh environment for them. Many of those divers came from Somalia because in Somalia they have and sang songs that are very familiar, as the research said, very familiar to divers in Bambara in Somalia. So they came as trained, and many of them were trained here later on as well. This is what they would wear, divers would wear. It's called shamshul, and they wear it to protect themselves from jellyfish and other things. Now, what's important for us all of this, and aside from the atrocities and the hardship of diving, is the singer that's called the Naham. A Naham is a chanter that goes on board of any sailing ship, and his sole job is to sing and to chant day in and day out. His job is to ease work on board of a ship, motivate them if he sees them not feeling well. If they see that they're really at a bed where an oyster bed where the harvest is really great, they will motivate them to go dive more. They're the ones who remind them at an easy day and a good day, will sing a song that tells them the end is near. He's the one who gives them hope. He's the one who tells them there are chores on board of a ship. Now we will sail, we will raise the sail, now we will lower the sail, now we will row, he's the person who detects that through music, and everything is through rhythm. Of course, he is African in identity, but the job requires him to speak and to sing it in a language that is different than the language he's familiar with. So many of them came with a deep, deep voice, with a huge lung capacity to sing, because this is almost like an opera. And then at the same time, they're able to put their own feeling into it. So it had an African taste with an Emirati or a Gulf lyrics. So they would sing, and many of them, before the diving season, they would compete like the Arab Idol. People would go, or The Voice, but no chair to turn though, but people would sit there and they would see how many poetry they remember and how can they recite and with whom did they went, on what ship they went previously, so they can convince people to take them. And they usually, the Naham receives a share of a diver, a share and a quarter of what the diver will catch. Mind you, the diver is diving and he's going through a hardship of submerging into water and everything and going through the danger of being attacked by sharks and others. But nonetheless, the Naham gets that share and a little bit more. So it is very important, and that's an influence because people could go and dive and be forced to do it. But the idea is really to make it as easy as possible. Like today we talk about making our customers happy. I think this is customer happiness guy here. The famous guy known for as a Naham is Jum'a Abu Smah, the last guy in the Emirates who is known for his ability to do Nahma. And he died, but Sharjah have recorded many of his, alhamdulillah, and they captured some of his chants. Addition to that, during the off-season, one way to melt into the music is the Africans participated in music called Al-Malid. And Al-Malid is a music sang to praise our Prophet, peace be upon him. And it's called Mawlid, and it's a Malid that is all poetry to say how great our Prophet is. So they participate in that. And it's one way of people go in trance once they sing these songs. And Africans are very good at that. They participate in Ayala as well, which is the call for war. Ayala means when somebody provoke you or jump you or antagonize you to go into war. So you, in return, you are prepared by carrying the stick. And it's symbolic to show that you are ready to fight them. So you do the yola to exhibit that you know how to use this weapon, you know how to carry the gun, you know how to swear it, you know how to throw it, you know how to... And men, of course, in this, they exhibit themselves as men. So women who see them, they can say, yeah, he's handsome, he's great, he's beautiful, he can throw the gun higher than anybody else. Okay, in Ayala, of course, there is a drum, and the drum is called Tabl al-Ras. Tabl al-Ras is a drum that is, if you can see it here, it's this one. It weighs 20 kilos, and it's very, very heavy. Without it, this type of music doesn't start. You start by hitting a tabl with this stick here. And the stick is from the palm tree. It had to be from a young palm, so it had the resonating sound when you hit it. It's one dum boom. Once they start that first hit, then the music and the orchestra will start. But without that hit, it would not. This tabla ras is always in the hands of somebody who's from African descent. Only recently, maybe with young folks, it had changed. But you can see now, maybe now their young people are trained to do that. Now this is tabla ras. And my only interpretation to this is that it was modified because these guys cannot carry a 20. Since the old guys died, the young ones cannot carry it, so they modify it to something that will make them carry it. And yes, even old people tell us, young people cannot do what we do. They cannot walk barefoot. They cannot make their kandora dirty. They cannot, God forbid, something comes on the kandora. They will run home to change it. The old guys, they get proud when they bring their family fish, carry something themselves. Young guys this time, they just beep, beep. They call the maid or somebody to come and take the stuff from them. So times have changed. That's why we see the drum have been modified to something like this rather than the 20. And of course, you see them also there. They used to be from a log from a tree, and now they're from a fiberglass. The sound is different, the meaning is different, the interpretation of manhood to the old folks is different. But that's not our topic, although it could be. Okay, so now with this modification it had affected, of course, the way music is played and the way people perceive the performance of and the meaning and the symbolic way of doing it. So like I said before, music was something, especially people of African descent, they did it and they were part of it everywhere and every time that they can. And if you look at, like we said, it's like self-indulgence if you engage yourself in music other than music that is designed for work or designed to make for a purpose. So that's why for a long time, people used to go in the outskirts of the cities, whether that Sharjah or Dubai, that's what I'm familiar with, I don't know about Abu Dhabi, and they would perform their music outside because they don't want to offend anybody if they perform it in the city. These are from Ronald Kudrai's thing. This is in Dubai. It's called tambura, which is the layer, but it is the technical name for it, or here in the Emirates it's called Noban because it had roots in Nuba, and this is what it is. The drums used to be buried and no longer now. Now they're fiberglass, and they had a little something to put them, to give them a sound of them being, of the burial. This lady still lives. She's almost 100 something. And this type of instruments are treated with respect, as we will see. The characteristics of African music is that when you practice African music here, at least in the Gulf, you don't wear shoes, you don't smoke, you don't drink, especially Chardonnay. You treat the instrument with respect because they have spirit, and you need to store them in the right way too. And they don't discriminate against anybody. Anybody can, any walk of life can come to any place of music or their gathering and be part of that. But they are not allowed to touch the instruments. They are allowed to sing, they're allowed to clap, they're allowed to enjoy themselves with respect, of course, and you have to respect the elderly. This is number one. You come into a group that is performing dance, you have to kiss the forehead of the head of that group. And that's how it is. These instruments are stored with respect, and one of them is Jamila. I was here last year on another occasion, and I thank NYU for inviting me. I spoke about an instrument called Jamila. And Jamila is this layer you see. To us, it's like a musical instrument like any other. But this musical instrument was once in Makran, in a house somewhere in Persia at that time, before it became Iran in 1979. So it was there, and people neglected it. So there was a fire in the house where she was kept, and the fire consumed most of the house. And some of her tassels and some of her decoration was burned. So she decided she's not going to stay there anymore. She jumped in the sea and she took a swim, and she came all the way to Dubai. She landed where Hyatt Regency is. People at the sea found her and they brought her in. One guy brought her to his house, and he just like people at that time, anything you find is a fortune, really. So he brought her in, and then somebody in the neighborhood recognized her. They said, "Oh, this is Jamila." So Jamila said, 2 days later, another one landed. It's her little sister, Naza'a. Sister also followed her. So both of them were swimming, crossing the sea. Once they landed here, these people took them in. They were recognized, and so they cleaned them, and they put strings, they put the tassels, and they made them presentable and everything. And they were playing them, and they were happy. Again, in 1950-some, there was a fire in the souk. And again, they were neglected. People were carrying their own things, and they neglected Jamila and her sister. So she got mad at these people again, and she left. They came looking for her. They couldn't find her. So days went by, and then, the Bedouin, to make money, they harvest wood from what they see out there, and they harvest wood, and they bring it into the city. They sell the wood, and then they buy food for their families, and they go back into the desert. So this Bedouin came, and he said, "I don't know what it is." He told people at the market, "It's jinn or something." It was around sunset, and I hear this boom, 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 boom. I don't know what's going on. They said, "Where is it?" He said, "By Tuwil Agrab." It is by the scorpion will. So people jumped in their jeep, and they went there. And they found Jamila on top of the tree. And they told her, "Come down." She said, "No, I'm not coming down. These people almost burned me, and I'm not coming down." "يا جميلة تعالي يا بنت الحلال نزلي." سايقين عليك الله. Finally, she said, "I will come only under one condition. Once a year, I'm not crossing back to Deira. I'm staying in Dubai. But once a year, you do a festival for me. And this festival, you have to slaughter a goat for me, and you have to invite people to come and eat, and you have to read and recite Quran for me and everything." So every year, there is a Jamila festival that takes place in Satwa. And for that, Satwa, people then convinced her. They took her to a place, and she remains there until today. I بشركم جميلة بخير. She's alive and well. I saw her 6 months ago, and we will see her again as we move on. So with stories like this, people, of course, really respect that these instruments have spirits. Although in Quran and in every belief, logical belief, that how can an instrument do that? So I asked a guy this question out of being an academic, and I said, "Do you really believe they have a spirit? Do you really believe it?" He said, "If I tell you leave now, would you believe that?" He said, one guy came and tried to play Jamila, and he was drunk. His name is Bilal. And they told him, "Please leave her alone. Or you go, once you're sober, you come back and play with her." He said, "No, I'm going to play it now." And he insisted. So he was playing, and one of the strings stuck him in the eye. And to this day, that guy is blind. One eye. So he said to me, "Do you believe it or not? Do you want Bilal to tell you? What other proof do you want from me?" I said, "No, I'm just asking because I'm doing a research." He said, "Bring me your teacher." Let your teacher play it. So these stories really made people live in the realm of, yes, it does, no, it doesn't. And made the Africans or people of African descent live a dichotomous life where they have to negotiate their existence here vis-a-vis fighting and trying to coexist. One is to exist as Muslim and accepted and everything here, yet not prying themselves from the belief system that they had and they have of their ancestors, because they were afraid if they abandon it, then something, a curse will come and get them. So that was the fight back and forth, and that's why they coexist with both. These are the, I showed you the drums we just saw buried, and now the drums are fiberglass and they hit by plastic. The same thing with Lewa. Lewa is, I'm going to come back to Noban later on because we're going to talk about secrecy later on. Lewa is another art that came from Eastern Africa and is still with us, practiced the same way it is practiced in Kenya and in Zanzibar and elsewhere in the Gulf. And the instruments are played and also made by the player because he knows the pitch that he wants. He knows exactly the length of the instrument and how, what control it will give him, the length, the width, whatever, the measurements of the technique. Of course, you're not African if you don't do what this guy is doing. You have to go the extra mile. So you have to exhibit that he is a master in what he does. He can do it even sleeping. So music, this is Lewa. And Lewa, many people said Lewa had many, many, many names. One of them is Liwa. In Arabic, Liwa is a flagship. Somebody said it's from Liwa. Somebody said Lewa is a drink that people, when they make it like alcohol, people drink it, and they call each other Lewa, Lewa. Somebody said no, it's a thing similar to a French word, which is a circle. Lewa is a circle that people call you to join them in this circle of fun. Come and let's have a party. Let's be revolving in a Lewa. Lewa, though, is the only music that still to this day maintained its Africanity. They can sing it both, and they translated the lyrics from African into Arabic music. One of the lyrics, I will show you, I think it's coming here as well. These are the drums, the African drums played for Lewa. And there are some of the lyrics. And this is it in Swahili, and this is it in Arabic. This is the separation of somebody that they say, may the wind hit, so they bring him back. Feroz al-Ghali, Saro Ibi'una. You cannot make anything of the songs that you hear. Feroz al-Ghali, Saro Ibi'una. People don't hear the lyrics. But if you stop, you can hear what they're singing. People think they're just having fun. They're passing information. They're crying within themselves with fun. They're really entertaining themselves, and that's why I think Africa had exported happiness. Out of all of that, the hardship of whatever condition they have gone through, without that African drum, we would not have had hip-hop, blues, rhythm and blues, whatever it is. So you sacrifice yourself for the other, for the world today to have fun. And I think that's the experience that we are missing in terms of something bad, something good coming from something very, very bad. So these are some of the lyrics. And here, the guy is crying about his home in Suwakin. And Suwakin is an area in Sudan. So each person, whatever the area that come from, they would sing a song about it. Of course, Dinga is the guy who defeated the British. So they sing about Osman Dinga. in Suwakin, and oh, Uthman Dinga is a hero, and Uthman Dinga is this. This is, in here they mention Jabal al-Akhdar Medina, Jubail al-Akhdar Medina, which is an area in Zalinga, which is now in the new state of South Lebanon. What is that? The new state in Sudan, South Sudan. Thank you. This is عذبت روحي يا مخا. Mukha is Mukha, whereas, of course, Mocha coffee is called after. It's part of Yemen. So these people here talk about Mocha because they cross the sea now coming from Suwakin into Mukha. Said they documented their move. Every place they go to, they documented. This guy is calling, Ya Jamila, سوي لي لونجي يا جميلة وإن جيت ساري يا جميلة ما بعد دياري يا جميلة. I live far away, I can't even go. The water is deep, and so they sing it. It's like strange fruit, very, you know, what's her name sang? Billie Holiday, thank you very much, I appreciate that. Yeah, strange fruit, about lynching in the South. So these are the songs that they sang through Lewa and people. These are the messages that are passed. Now we come to Zar, which is part of what is, of course, without the spirit position and without that, the realm of the unknown. And why is this important? Because that's the only way they can resist their condition. Many of them acted like they are possessed, so they would not, their masters would leave them, so they would not die that day. Oh, today I'm having the jerks. So they leave them. Nobody wants to take and force them to do that because they're afraid of the consequences. The karma will come and get them if they force them. That's their only way of resistance. And then, birth of a nation. In 1971, of course, the Union of the United Arab Emirates, the very first person who gave his life is Suhail, who died in Tomb. So, yeah, Tomb al-Kubra. He died on the 30th November. And we have, of course, many personalities that are today. You could see the faces all over the place, including mine. You see Awad al-Dukhi, for example, one of the instrumental singers of this century, of last century, I think. He was really, really a guy who sang, a multifaceted artist, who sang songs from African, like the Jamila song, to Kulthum songs. So a wide range of artistic ability. And then we got Fan al-Sawt, which evolved in the 50s. And this is a master, Mohammed bin Zoid from Bahrain. He was a master in it. Dagg al-Hab was also one of the arts that was performed because, inshallah, how that works. I had the sound here, but it doesn't. No, it's not embedded. Dagg al-Hab is an art that exactly it's practiced in parts of Africa, the same way they pound it, and the same songs. And it's, before Ramadan, of course, people used to bring the barley and they pound it, so when they cook it during the time that they're fasting, it's broken and it's easy. People didn't have mills and what we enjoy today, nor they were clean, so they take them to a place where they can pick all the particles and all the impurities from it, and then they pound it, and then they give it to the people. So people gather together and do it. Unfortunately, this art is extinct no longer. When the ladies died, it died with them. Maybe in Bahrain and other parts of the Gulf, you could find it. Anytime and every time you see women dance with men, every time you see that mixture of men and women, that means it had that African influence. And of course, there are so many arts. This is the Waliya, Soma, Laro, in all arts that you can find, including this is the Noban, this is part of the Zar, and including. But of course, when it's like people were improvising, they will sing anything until there was an orchestra, so somebody had to sing in front of a live playing band. So there we see some artists who came out of that, and they were mainly of African descent, and then others followed. These are the ladies. This I call her our Diana Ross and the Supremes, and because there isn't any hairdo, anything that she didn't do, this lady. Allah yarhamha. She was creative. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, to this day, their songs really make us arouse our yearning and nostalgia to these days. And here is somebody like me, always at the crack looking to see, to record, to remember. This is the lady that we're going to go into her house in a minute. Her name is Kaniz. She's about 95 now. Life and well, and her memory is better than yours and mine combined. She remembered what she had for lunch in 1950. I'm like, oh my goodness. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, Allah ya'tiha al-afiyah. So you enter her house, of course. Choose her to be outside. This is from a mosque, but it's closer to what you would see next to her house. Inside her house. When they engage in the music, they call it play, because everything else in life is serious. Their music is play because they have to differentiate it from work. This work music is when you're doing something. This is for themselves. The little bit that they have, they call play. So they take play seriously. They joke, they mimic each other, they challenge each other. They do what they do in a circle that people come in and come out. They do the things that they're not allowed to do in the outside society. This was by mistake. This is Kaniz at her most, because she is a matriarch. This is her house, and this is an element of her possession. Possession and possession. So if she's possessed, if she's in trance, this is what she will carry in her hand. This is her scepter, if you will. Her kingdom is ruled through this stick. If she dies, then she passes it on to somebody else. So we see within that society within a society, there is a matriarch. And matriarchy, as we well know, is an African characteristic. These are some of her boys. And here's where, in her house, these instruments are kept. Jamila is covered right there. And I'm not allowed, I entered the room, I'm not allowed to touch anything with my hand. Although I came wudu, I all did my ablution and everything, I'm ready to pray. I'm clean, and I'm not allowed to touch anything. This is it's called manure. It's a skirt made out of hoofs, of goat hoofs. And they shake it to give that rattling sound, and it's used in the music. It is also holy. You cannot touch it. This is Jamila. He's trying to prepare her. So before he prays her, he had to burn incense, frankincense, because she cannot be just like that. You need to warm her up. and then he would play her. To play this instrument, you have to pluck it with the horn of a deer or one of, and this is, I like the design because it had wine on it here, like a little grapes for wine, and I don't know what the connection, but that's the design, and this is the horn. It is very similar to al-malad because there is an altar, and on the altar they have maward and madkhan. They have maward and marash here. And the madkhan had oud in it, and the other one they have. The same way they respect the space. The space is respected, and nobody's wearing shoes. And my word is dispensed. The same way in Kaniz's house, this is what she has. And al-Madkhan with the Liban and the other things. This is one of the boys that is now nominated to become the vice president. Okay, so here we come to the bit of secrecy. You'll pass through homes that would have a post, and you don't know what this is. A home, it's like a stick, like any other stick. But in fact, if it's flying a flag, that means they have an event that night. You will pass by it, you will see it, it's just a flagstaff. These are the secrets that are passed without people knowing or understanding or even realizing. The stick had to be red and white. The flag staff had to be red and white. And once they put a flag on it, that means there is an event tonight, so others would know and they will tell each other. They don't call each other by phone. Rarely they do. You pass by there, you see the flag, you come. On top of the flag here, there is a plane. I don't know where it's taken off to, but there's a plane. Inside, at the bottom, there is a burning. There's a burning here frankincense if there is an event, and this is called al-mawrid. And this is how it is, where they slaughter something and the blood goes into there. So the strength of this pole comes from the blood drained into that hole, going into the pole, into the buried bit of this flagstaff. It's similar exactly to what they do in Haiti. They have exactly the same when they do a voodoo sacrifice. This is not related. Okay. If a prominent figure of the group dies, then they have to bring all the instruments that you saw, the drums and everything, and the sticks and everything, to the sea. They wash them at the sea and they bring them back, as if they are baptized them. That's exactly the meaning of it, is to cleanse them. Salty water cleanse everything in their view. I found that similar to, in here, they go into the sea and they do it. Exactly like that. Sometimes if there are members who cannot go to the sea, they bring them water in jugs like this, and they would wash their feet with the water once they come in there, exactly like they do in the church when they wash their feet. To sacrifice, it had to be very specific. It had to be black, not gray hair, black. If they ask for black, black. Not 2 horns or 4. Not puny, one puny and one. It had to be a perfect black. So they go shopping for years until they find the exact match for the sacrifice. It had to be that. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. They're not matching what the ancestors want. Once the killing takes place, they take 1/3 of, in a cup of coffee, 1/3 of that blood, 1/3 saffron, and 1/3 of rose water. And that's what they drink, if they have to drink it. I asked the guy, I said, so you don't drink blood like this? He said, are you crazy? We're gonna get sick. There is mad cow disease. So they live and they survive, and that's who they are. Thank you very much. Thank you. I would have brought with me some sound samples, I thought, but for the interest of time, just that, yeah. Q&A, if anybody have any questions. تفضل.
My name is Mohammed Al-Suwaidi from Khalifa University. And my question is, when did Jamila perform her last live performance? Like in public?
Concert, yeah.
Yeah, in public. Like, is there any recording of that?
لا, she's for special occasions. She doesn't leave the house.
So when was the last time?
The
No one
last
knows?
time? لا, I don't think she ever left. Because they made a promise when they brought her in, is that once she's in, she's not going to leave. They take others. They have maybe 20 other tambarats في البيت. They take others. But Jamila is the supervisor. She had the status of,
Right.
of sitting home and...
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Christina and I'm a student here. And I was wondering, within official sort of heritage discourses in the UAE, how acknowledged is the African influence in the culture?
Okay, let's see now. You could hear the drums, right? Even in the influence is tremendous. And I think the turning point happened when, after the decline of pearl diving, this live music came, which is high rhythm music. I compare it to rock and roll, because after the 1930s in the US, people were depressed and everything, and Little Richard came up with the twist and everything else. So they revived, black people, they revived that music. Elvis Presley then came and borrowed some of that. And so with that, then the rhythm carried on, so we hear fast music. The same thing here. After the decline of pearl diving, people were really depressed. The music, people traveled to Kuwait and brought back some influence. They traveled everywhere. And everywhere in the Gulf, there were black people who were really at the music, at the, the production of it. So with that, then it became the music we hear today. How? When the Union of the United Arab Emirates happened in 1971, they established sport teams, and people to go and roar for their teams, مشجعين, those ardent, youth. They used to sing for them, يا الله ولا الله ويا منتخبنا الغالي. All of that is right. So slowly, Aidal Minhali came to sing it, and other people came to sing it. So the sports teams were the ones who normalized these rhythms. ما في بس يطلع في مشجعين ما حد طالع يدق من ظهر. And that's how it became known.
Hi, I'm Bill Bragan from the Arts Center. I'm back here.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha, for this talk and for your previous one, which sort of inspired us to invite the New Balance Ensemble to perform on a festival in March. And I was interested to hear the sort of historical connections to Ethiopia, because the bill is going to be with an artist from Ethiopia, as well as a group that's mixing voodoo music and rock based in Haiti. And so to my understanding that the Haitian music is really finding its roots in Benin, and as you talk about Nuban, it sounds like the roots can be traced more back to Sudan and Somalia in part. And I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit more about that relationship between some of the practices that parallel in Nuban with voodoo practice, and how some of those traditions might have migrated across the continent.
I'll be very, very honest with you. The last time I was engaged in making this connection is when I was invited by NYU last year. And I was doing some research, and I said, wait a minute, there are some similarities here. I really want to dig more and to find out. Mind you, all the Africans who came through Zanzibar and elsewhere, they came from other parts of Africa, and that influence could come from Benin, could come from Senegal, could come, we see lots of influence even from the Hausa. You know, from Nigeria. There is a huge influence in the talking drum. The talking drum was effective here for a period of time, and I think it died a natural death when people who used to play it and understand the messages died. So I think if I come again, I promise I'll dig more into that. But for now, I'm fascinated by similarities in the practices that they do. But I don't know how deep, if there's connection in terms of music, in terms of relationship to the symbolic ways that they do the ritual. So thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Rola, and I just wanted to ask, with all the changes that are happening, what do you think the future generations, how are they going to be able to carry on and adapt if it's going to continue?
The music now is considered foreign music. So it is practiced by those who out of interest. It's like pearl diving. It's no longer people do it. It's people dive recreationally. So it's on people who wants to do it, they will do it. But some families carry the tradition. There are some members that will carry it. I think it will stay with us for 5 more years, no more, and then it'll find its way to disappearance. But nobody's interested. No, I recorded it once, and that was '95, I think. The last festival I recorded, and I haven't been invited yet. I travel, so I don't know what time they do it. Whenever they gather and they see the right weather and the right group and whatever, they do it. They're spontaneous. They don't do strategic planning or KPIs, or they don't have the feedback from their. So their life is good, but I really don't know how long they. Especially with the Jamila, I will ask. But unfortunately, this type of music, it's on don't ask, don't tell type thing. Yeah. Thanks for your question. تفضلي. Lady here. Yes. Yes.
Yes, you mentioned talking about how racism was a sort of luxury because circumstances were too difficult for people to be racially discriminated against each other. And you discussed how racism wasn't, back then, it wasn't as bad, that people of African descent were well integrated. How do you compare that to people of African descent in modern Emirati or Gulf society today, as I hear a lot of Black Emiratis talking about how they today, people in their teens and their 20s talking about how they feel that they are being racially discriminated against and profiled, that, oh, you're Black, you are other, you are not of us, and they feel very hurt because of that. How do you compare this modern day phenomenon that we have to how racism and they were integrated in society back then in those days?
Yeah, I think it's the influence of, they see maybe, they haven't been against the wall. There is no racial profiling. There isn't segregation. They can pray anywhere. They can carry any job they want. They can see the sheikh anytime. They can shake hands with shuyukh, Allah yahfadhum. They got everything. I think that is out of luxury now. You know, that's really, I look at it, it's like you're acting out. There is no reason but for you to put your head down and work hard and work for a country called United Arab Emirates. That's exactly the reverse, if you will, because there is no reason for it. And if they cry racism, then they cry for, they did not endure it themselves. If they cry for their ancestors, it's time, and every country had a black, had a tainted windows. So let them really look at the good in things, face value, because otherwise they will live in this vicious circle of nothing. We got everything. I mean, we're crying about what? They could marry who they want, they can take a job they want, they can... شو هالبطرة بعد؟ هاي بولهم ضرب. بولهم عصا. مطرق محناي. Any other question? Please.
Yes, thank you for a great account. In the beginning, you talked about that most of them came voluntarily to the UAE or the Gulf.
Yeah.
Are there any account how some of them ended up getting a master? Just if we compare with maybe what's going on right now in Libya or something. Are there any accounts of maybe historically of how they ended up having a master if they came voluntarily here?
No, they came and they left as merchants, or they came to sell something and go. And let me tell you about those who stayed. The British decided in the 1800s, late 1800s, to dispose those slaves. They thought, they're freeing them, so, hey, you guys, we're going to take you back to Africa. They refused. Nobody wanted to go. So they said to them, they gave them 3 options. They called it the British disposal plan. And they decided to take them to Sarawak next to Brunei. Then they refused. They took them to India, and they had a fight because the caste system cannot accept something in addition to its complicated situation. So they had a fight. They could not fit somewhere in that caste system, the Indian caste system. And they had a fight in Bombay, and they came back. And they never wanted to go back. Then 15 of them decided they want to go back to Zanzibar to work at the Sultan Clove Farms. Only 15 of them. They left, and they found a way to come back. So they always want to come because people, like I said, they want to survive. People even who came on their own will, came as merchants, they did what they had to do, and they went back. Like people see, they cannot stay longer. If you're a merchant, you make your profit, you go. But they did not stay, really. There are few records of them not staying, but rather doing quick job and going, Please? There are, of course.
I'm sorry, a twofold question.
Yeah.
I got confused. When I was looking at the picture that you showed of the men rowing, and you were talking about pearl divers, and I'm trying to understand because, as an American, in the American history of slavery, I don't think I need it. Thank you. I have a big mouth. Okay, and I'm trying to understand that. From my limited understanding of this history as it relates to this side of the world, those men looked... I'm trying to understand who are the enslavers that you're speaking of, if you're understanding from this man's question that they were only British. And I'm a little confused on that. Maybe I've misunderstood it as you're giving it to me. And then I'm trying to understand the history as it relates to these Africans on the picture, and as it relates to local Arabs who were pearl divers and who were fishermen, because that is a different perspective as I'm taking it from my history and from what I'm understanding about what I've read about the dynamic from this side of the world,
Yeah.
the Middle East.
I'll show you a picture here. Let's see. If you see the faces of people who went pearl diving, of course there is like people. Oh, I'm sorry. Or maybe disconnected. Yeah, أبغى الصور. If you look at this picture, this is the realistic way of who went diving. And many of the Africans came, let's say, people from Makran, for example, they came here to work. They were menial workers who were barely paid because they have to catch something for them to sell it to pay back for them being here. Africans were brought here, yes, they were brought here. But like I said, they lived a living condition that is, they were accepted like a family member. They were not considered slaves, but rather they worked with the families. That's why they were easy to assimilate. They were treated with respect, and they were part of the family. That's why it's completely different than what happened in the States. They did not even call them slaves. They gave them names better than the names of the masters themselves. The master will call themselves Saqar. They give their holders, they give them a name of Ghazal, that they beautify their names. So it is completely different situation. There were no segregation. They lived in the same household. They lived in the same room. They slept with them in the same rooms. They were companions to their children. That's why they enjoyed the life of being, and they thought that they are members of that family, and they spoke with authority, which is, I hope that clarifies. It's not to say enslavement, of course, happened, but the experience that happened here is completely different. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Abir Basharahil. I'm a researcher in oral history. I did most of the oral history archiving and documented to the National Archives. Here is different, I think, from the other countries or something. Not about maybe, I will talk about United Arab Emirates. Some of the sheikhs, ladies, if she doesn't want to go to a wedding or she cannot go a place, she will send her, if you will say, slave or whatever, instead of her to represent her. She will wear the best kandora, the dress, and the gold, and everything, and she will go as representative of the sheikha. This is what was happening here. It's what the people said, or what they told us, how they lived and how they treated the African, Emirati, or because there is no, they said we are all human beings. There is no differences. Thank you.
The lady here, please. Okay.
Dr. Aisha, thank you for your lecture. I was a bit curious about some of the written accounts that you had at the very beginning, where they came from, who was the one documenting them. Just curious about that.
The British collected, they claimed that there were some fugitive slaves that they took. Of course, the system happens this way. You would take money and buy food and provide for your family before you go diving. when you come back from diving, then you pay the captain of the ship and you pay whatever you owe. So sometimes some of those divers did not come back here. They would remain in Bahrain. So they would go to the British embassy or the British agent, and they will say a residency and say that we've been ill-treated, we've been like this, so they tell their story to get manumission and stay there so they don't come back. And if they granted that manumission certificate, then they would not be held accountable to pay back their debt if they come here, if they return. Yeah.
مشكورة دكتورة عايشة. Please let's give دكتورة عايشة another round of applause, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you.